Reed was scheduled to give a talk, and that was like God, let's see, time has passed so quickly. Like, what was this, last Friday before it, something like that? That was going to be co-sponsored by the New York and Philadelphia chapters of Democratic Socialists of America. And the talk was going to be on what he calls racial disparity ideology, which is worth unpacking a little bit what that means. So the immediate context of this was racial disparities in COVID deaths. That, of course, Black people have been dying at a much higher rate than white people from COVID. And of course, like, the thing that is the starting point, and, like, whatever, you shouldn't have to say this should go without saying, right? But the thing that's the starting point for everybody in this discussion is, hey, if there are these, dramatic racial disparities and life outcomes that manifest in things like how likely you are to die from the pandemic, that's really bad, and we should fix that, right? Like, that's, everybody agrees with that starting point. The question is, how should we frame the issue? How should we analyze what's going on there? And what kind of strategy can we have for doing something about it? And so what he objects to when he talks about racial disparity ideology is where your whole explanation of why this is like racism. That's the, that's it, right? That's the sort of beginning and end
magic
of your analysis, right? Or if you really want to show people that, like, you're serious about this, you throw in words like structural or systemic, and you never actually bother to explain what you mean by that, which is
that Joe Biden op-ed today, if you saw. I don't know.
I thought that piece of leadership, Peter, was absolutely incredible, and that those solutions that he posed forward were the exact kind of things that the American Black people need. And
I'm just impressed that he didn't go on some sort of digression about corn pop, frankly. But
it's sad. It is sad.
So the question is okay, like, whether you're going to use the phrase structural racism or, I think something that might be more helpful would be like, I don't know, racialized capitalism. Then the question is, okay, like, what's the nature of that structure? How does it work? Right? What can we do about it? And so part of his concern in this is that just sort of throwing out the racial disparity without really having any kind of larger explanation of it could lead to a revitalization of what he calls racial medicine. In other words, the idea that, now, of course, it is true that that sometimes there are genetic patterns that are linked to common ancestry and might at least roughly line up with our idea of race, right? That could be medically relevant in some contexts. But, his general concern there, which is a longstanding thing he's been pushing, is that, look, race is silly made up bullshit.
Exactly.
Right?
It's ideology.
This is a socially constructed historical category. This is not a natural genetic distinction. And so he's concerned.
Which we should be pushing this idea, but no.
We should.
We're washing Black people's feet instead.
When Black people, especially not just Black Americans, when Black people in general hear this, they hear you're saying that our shared struggle is invalid. And that's not what this is about. That's not what someone like Adolph Reed is saying.
It's actually the full argument against the idea that Black people are anything other than another human being.
Exactly. And that's the reason why I don't think, and this is why, and I was very involved in Black Lives Matter, and I used to, like, all of my political involvement used to be on lines of race. And I was very quickly black-pilled because I started to very quickly realize that it's not an expedient political ground to organize on, and it's not one that doesn't end up devolving into the endless reductions of that identity and of, the different forms. And it sort of leads to a dead end in that regard. And it's such a controversial thing to say when you have people. Like today I was watching Cornel West, and he was talking about the funeral of George Floyd, and obviously it's an incredibly emotional event. And I really like Cornel West. I I think Cornelius is a great orator,
Me
great
too.
speaker. But some of the
Yeah.
stuff he was saying about Black struggle sounded almost as if he was saying Black people are Christ-like, like as a collective we're Christ-like, and that freaked me out because it's martyrdom, it's victimhood, it's the idea that we're this like, and that's the thing that really got to me when it came to organizing on Black Lives, the idea that we have this shared identity, even though, and we're purely racialized subjects, even though I may not like somebody who's Black because I don't get on with them, but we're expected to have this sort of shared telepathy because we've been through similar struggles, or a rich Black person, for instance, somebody who's not of the same class as me, I'm supposed to empathize with their plight simply because we share the same skin color. It's very dehumanizing, and it's also incredibly limiting in terms of what you're allowed to be seen doing. And to the sort of egregore or hive mind of this Black identity, if you're questioning it, then you get pushed out. I've seen people say that Adolph Reed isn't Black. They've called him a coon. They've called him Candace Owens of the left. They've called him all kinds of things. I get called the same thing for being critical of this sort of liberal mode, and it's horrible. It's horrifying.
Yeah, you probably won't be speaking at the NYDSA anytime soon.
I'm cool.
Yeah,
with
and-
that.
and by
I
the
like
way,
to clapping is fun.
Yeah.
Of privilege.
Yeah, if you ever do get invited to speak at a DSA event, you got to insist that people clap at the end. Talk about how offended you'll be if they don't. But no, I was actually just before I was just reading an old article from 2016 by Adolph Reed where he's talking about something I guess he'd written about Hurricane Katrina. And the class dynamics of some of what happened there. And he's talking about a couple of writers who responded to him. And he says, and I'll quote, these writers, quote, insisted that I did not understand the power of white racism in New Orleans, a city they visited as disaster tourists with simplistic potted narrative, and where I largely grew up in the Jim Crow era, the most intense period of post-war civil rights insurgency, and where most of my family lives and had lived before, during, and after Katrina. I'm not going to natter on about my racial bona fides. I'll leave that domain to the likes of, all right, he calls out a couple people. I won't mention their
I like
name.
him. I like him a lot.
For whom
Adolph
every
Reed is
side
great, yeah.
for whom every sideways glance from a random white person while waiting online for a latte becomes an occasion for navel-gazing lament and another paycheck.
Amen.
So-
Amen. He went in. And that's the thing is, I'm so happy that someone like him exists, because the thing is, the liberal mode, the reason why it's so attractive to so many Black people is because it basically provides a false avenue for empowerment. It says if you stay in this sort of permanently racialized gilded cage, it could be a route to power for you. And as somebody who has been the pet of white neoliberal establishments before, it can be very financially and materially expedient to occupy that place, but it's also incredibly dehumanizing, and it's also a prison. And if you're a Black person who's on the left and you decide you're going to step out of that neoliberal racialized pigeonhole, you're basically rudderless, which is why I feel like the broader left, the Marxist left, needs to do a better job of empowerment narratives if we want to be able to rescue people of color from that ontological prison. The reason why they hold on to it so much is because they're like, well, this is empowering for me. What do you have to offer me? And as somebody who has left that panopticon to come to the broader left, I can say that we also need to do our work. We don't have much to offer. When I suffer racism, or I feel like I'm being tokenized, I feel like I can't talk about it or express it because I don't want to give fodder to the, liberal left. But at the same time, it's like you have nowhere to turn, you have nowhere to go, and your own people despise you because you're calling out what they perceive as their only avenue to empowerment. If you're somebody who a white institution decides, and it happened to me when I first started making YouTube videos, a lot of the bigger white prominent YouTubers, they didn't engage with my work. They didn't care who I was. They just saw a Black face who was like somewhat articulate, and they were like, oh, this is somebody who we can elevate to make it seem as if we care about the plight of other Black people. They were tired of getting the bread tube so white accusation levied at them. So they decided that they were going to sort of cherry pick me. And when I rejected that, when I was like, no, I don't want this, I was met with the worst kind of derision from these people. The worst kind of derision. They were like, almost like how dare you? We're offering you something that loads of people want the opportunity to get, and you're turning it down. And then other black people were disappointed because they were like, oh, you could have represented us. You could have been representation. Why would you turn down the opportunity to be representation? I'm like, because it doesn't change anything. It doesn't change the fundamental structures, and it's also not freedom. It's a false sense of empowerment that's being sold. So yeah, I'm definitely glad that people like Adolph Reed exist and are doing work. It's so important.
You got the same shit pretty often that Adolph Reed gets, which is being called a class reductionist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, that's the reason why they canceled this talk.
Yeah. So
right?
so the talk. So his larger point, right? That he was going to make in the talk, and that he's made elsewhere, is that, because after all, this is not a natural genetic category, the social one is a historical one. The reason that black people are more likely to die of COVID than white people is that black people are more likely to be poor than white people due to the, racial apartheid history of the United States, right? So really what we instead of framing this as an exclusively racial issue, right, the way we should be framing this is an issue about poverty, right?
exactly.
Being bad per se. I had seen, I'd just gotten a chance to sort of notice this and screenshot it before the event page was taken down. The Facebook event page for the talk was littered with stuff like, you've got to cancel this, class reductionism has no place in DSA, stuff like this. And
class reduction.
yeah,
I just find that so ironic. Like, these people are like, we can't talk about class, not at the Democratic Socialists of America.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to stuff like the recancellation, like I sort of have like increasingly like a, no negotiating with terrorists kind of view about
Same.
it. Like, don't, because like a couple
Totally
years,
there.
if this had happened a couple of years ago, I would have been exactly the guy to be like, okay, I see where you're coming from, but like, what about this? And now I'm just like, no, fuck him, right? Don't give him an inch,
Yes.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. We can't give them a fucking inch anymore. That's the thing. This is something like we were maybe saying about a year ago when people were really fucking like coming for. Angie had just done her social justice is a clout game video, and
good video.
yeah, it's a great video. But they started in with that kind of shit where they were just picking at different things, and we were just starting like no inch giving here, and it's taken about a year for people to finally fucking get that you can't actually stop us.
Yeah. But
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so, and again, like, I know this is the least of it, but I just kind of can't get over it. It's like, yeah, like, how many times have you heard from people like that? Oh no, we really need to like elevate black voices, and it's like, yeah, but when we say
Certain
black voices, we mean like not Adolph Reed, not Cedric Johnson, not Paul Prescott, not Angie, etc. Like, like basically, we want to what they mean is we want to elevate the voices of black people who agree with us.
exactly.
Black liberals matter.
Yes. Like,